CRO isn't about changing elements on a page. It's about solving people's problems.
What is going on, certified homies? Welcome to another episode of From A to B. You have Shiva, and I'm joined by repeat guest Talia the Wolf.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
So just to reiterate, your role is CEO at GetUplift.co. But more importantly, I just found out for the first time, you are a member of the 1,000 skydiving jumps. Oh, sorry, I don't know. That was the worst way to possibly phrase that ever. Are you an adrenaline junkie?
I am.
That's awesome.
There's just no other way. Yeah, I've done over 1,000 jumps. Some like just for fun, some photography, some like instructor, like.
How does the adrenaline high of skydiving compare to peaking at a test?
Oh, not even close, man. Just like, that's not adrenaline. That's just like, oh, okay. That's fine.
Yeah, it's funny. There was someone who posted in the experimentation Slack. He ran his first test ever. I'll give him a shout out later in the comments. He ran his first test and he's like, yeah, I've checked these results like 7 times. And I'm like, of course you have.
Cute.
I did too. That was
Cute.
Cool. All right. So the reason why I wanted to have you on this week was I saw your post about effectively you defined out a list of tactics and you're like, people think this is strategic, but it's not. And I think the 2 things you called out in your post were velocity and tracking, that perhaps people think like having a high velocity equals a strategic testing program, or setting up your tracking is strategic testing, is like strategic experimentation. I'm totally aligned, but can you explain to me a little bit more about why you think that's not strategic and you believe that's more in the tactical vein of like experimentation?
First of all, I think most people treat CRO like tactics. So it's like, oh, I have a metric I need to optimize for. So my approach to it is, what changes can I make on a page that will increase conversions, right? In most businesses, it's not part of like the whole marketing strategy. And because of that, what happens, I like to call this the hamster wheel of optimization. You don't really know what to test. So it's easy to kind of find what's wrong in Google Analytics. And you know how to run an A/B test because you probably have the right software. But knowing what changes to make on a page that will actually increase conversions is really hard. And then what we do is we test random stuff. And we test random stuff and we copy our competitors and we don't know what to do because nothing's working. And then we use software to make it better. And then that doesn't work. So you're back to testing random stuff. And I say all this because the general approach to CRO is tactical.
But it shouldn't be.
No, of course not. Yes, it should not be. So when I think about strategic CRO, I've like coined this thing like, oh, you should be doing strategic CRO, not that CRO. Right? Like,
sorry to interrupt. I Googled strategic CRO to see if like anyone was talking about it, and like no one's talking about it, which I think can offer both sides of the coin of there are many of us who know CRO is strategic and therefore we don't need to talk about it. And then the flip side, people don't understand that tactics aren't strategic CRO, but they're in Dunning-Kruger and they just believe that. And then they just don't talk about it.
I think the problem here is twofold. One is that when I speak to clients or new clients of mine and I ask them about their CRO strategy, what they talk about is metrics and tactics and their KPIs and their OKRs and MQLs and what they're trying to reach. And then I have to walk them through this whole process of like, here's what strategic CRO really is. Here's what CRO actually means. But the second problem is, okay, I've done this with my clients, but now I'm on LinkedIn and every other post that I see is about here's how to, expand velocity. Here's how to get better metrics. And here's how to use this software or try this tool or sorry, tactical. And then these same potential clients or businesses are following these people. And it's kind of the cycle that they're thinking, oh, okay, conversion optimization is about velocity. The more you test, the better. Or it's about using the right tools, or it's about tracking the right stuff. And by all means, I'm not saying this isn't important, but that's not what CRO is about. So if we want to define what CRO is, which I'm calling strategic CRO, but should just be, hey, CRO should be used to make critical business decisions. You should be leveraging all your experiments, and not just, because CRO is about more than A/B testing. It's about the research that you're doing. It's the whole thing. You should be leveraging your whole CRO methodology to answer critical questions about your customers, about your product, about your pricing. It should be the thing where when you as a team, whether it's product or marketing or sales, have a question, hey, what are the best customer journeys people should go through? What should our pricing tiers look like? What features should we be adding into our product? All of that can be answered with CRO if you're doing it strategically. This is kind of where my beef was, where I was talking to people about, okay, what is your plan for 2025? And they're like, we want to ramp up, we want to run more tests, we want to get our metrics and tracking straight. And as I said, like super critical. But where's the foundation? Like, what are you trying to achieve with CRO?
It's funny because like when I've started a couple jobs and I've talked to people and even done interviews, they're like, day 2, they're like, what's your roadmap? And I'm like, dude, I don't know. There's no basis of research. I still don't have health insurance. Like, what are you trying to do here? Like, I need some time to formulate a strategy based on the research. And that's where I guess maybe we're nudging a little bit into like what is tactical versus strategic here. You're kind of been saying it, to be honest. At that point, you have strategic CRO is formed from a basis of strategy, and that strategy comes from that research. Whereas there are some people, and this is maybe like a job red flag, if you will. If someone's like, what are the first 10 tests you'll run, and you don't have any data in the interview or something, then you'd be like, dude, I don't know. And that's a green flag for me in the hiring process, but that's a red flag. Unless they're like, well, I've tried this before and it might work, but I'd like to see the data, then that's fine. I think that's a perfectly acceptable nuance. But I want to trigger you right now.
Thank you.
This is the only reason why I had you on the podcast. So I don't want to throw shade at HubSpot because I just think we differ on the definitions between HubSpot's view of UX versus CRO and and probably your definition. But they have this chart on their blog that defines UX versus CRO. And here's a couple things. I did this with Victoria Seiko last episode, but I'm curious, this relates here. I think you're talking about how CRO sometimes gets boxed in and viewed differently because people see all the LinkedIn posts and they're like, oh, comment whatever checklist. And that it creates this cycle of negativity into boxing CRO into tactical. So I think that's part of this. Another part of it is this like separation of UX versus CRO, when in many cases, there's so much more overlap, but instead people are creating the bifurcation. So let me tell you the differences that HubSpot believes here.
Can I just say that this is like, I feel like I'm back in 2010.
Are we getting worse? Is our industry getting worse?
I literally wrote, seriously, I don't know when it was, like 2011, like 2011, 2012. I wrote a blog post about why UX is part of CRO and not two different things. It's so interesting that like, okay, we're back to this discussion. Yes, please enlighten me.
So apparently this was published September 11th, 2024.
Okay.
So that's recent. That's not like I was like, wait, is this an old blog post that was like 10 years ago? No. This is current. In their chart, they're saying UX versus CRO. The primary focus of UX is user satisfaction and ease of use. And the primary focus of CRO is increasing conversion rates. And I'm like, come on. HubSpot, again, no shade thrown at you guys in particular. I just disagree. And I think that's where a lot of CROs almost fall into being boxed into tactics because of the LinkedIn shit, because of folks who are like, oh, CRO, go test your button colors and go test your button text. Us UX will handle the real optimization and the real, user satisfaction.
Oh, so much to say. Sorry, did you? Oh my God.
Your brain just turned off for like a second. You're like, I need a reboot.
I think it annoys me mostly because UX research doesn't answer the kind of stuff that CRO research can actually answer, which is so interesting to me. Yes, I do. I see this a lot. Like I see so many companies putting CRO in this box of like, oh, you need to optimize a landing page, go test a button or go reduce a form field. And UX, I mean, it's part of CRO, right? Because here's the thing, and I say this all the time, like CRO isn't about changing elements on a page. It's about solving people's problems. If you can solve a person's problem on the page, and that means messaging, design, UX, everything, the lot. It means as soon as someone lands on your page, A, they can see that you're solving a specific problem that they care about. B, you're solving it by telling them, here's what you need to do. Here's the action you need to take in order to solve this problem. And 3, you have made the experience, the user experience, so easy and simple for them to take that action and get that result. That's CRO. It's not one little piece. It's everything. You're there to solve people's problems. And that's what good CRO does.
100%. So I was talking to Victoria that last episode about the same things. She was like, this is my perspective of CRO. And I was like, I hate this because I think it's right for you to feel that way because of everything that you read on LinkedIn. And there are very prominent people boxing us in. So I think it's logical that you believe that. But I hate that you feel that way because it inherently diminishes our program and what we do. 2 tactics. So I'd love to go a little bit deeper into this. I want to figure out as we get boxed into these tactics through, the ether of talking about experimentation through LinkedIn, through HubSpot telling us all we test is button colors or whatever that is. Let's start with this. What is strategy? Like, how do we define strategy versus tactics to make sure that we can all have the same mental model of working towards strategic CRO?
I mean, it's a great question. I would say in CRO, at least for me, the strategy is always around the foundation of it is customer first, right? How I'm setting out to uncover with CRO, what are the best paths for prospects? So what are the things that are going to enlighten them? How are they going to feel after they convert? I want to leverage strategy. I want to be able to use results. If all you're doing is testing buttons, you might get some results, but you're not going to get scalable results. So when I think about strategy within CRO, I'm thinking, what are the questions, the big questions you have, and how can you leverage CRO to answer them? That's strategy. It's coming in with, I want to uncover something. I want to learn why people buy from us. I want to learn why they buy from us and not from the competitor. Or I want to understand what's the best path to send someone down that isn't based on a best practice or because I A/B tested something, but because it's really something that we're seeing in our ICP. So you're coming in and saying, I have a question about the business and about the product. I'm trying to figure out X. That is strategy. It's when you have a real question. It's not just about, I need to get 150,000 free trials signups this year.
That's a goal.
That's a goal. That's your KPI. The question will be, how do I uncover using CRO the best paths for people or the most influencing, the most emotionally resonating experiences for customers so that I can then measure it by achieving that goal. So if I have reached 150,000 free trials signups, I know that I have technically achieved, I've answered that question. I now know what are the right things I need to say or make people feel or do on my website so people convert, if that makes sense.
Totally. I was hoping for a more technical definition, but I actually think you're not a dictionary. Like I didn't have you on because you're a dictionary. That was a very practical application of strategy in CRO. The technical definition was a plan of, this is Webster, a plan of action or policy designed to achieve a major or overall aim. So it's kind of interesting that it's generic, obviously, but the way that I've tried to approach strategic versus tactical, and I think this is, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but the framework I think about it is a tactic is a thing you could do, but a strategy is a theme that you could kind of layer over a bunch of things that you do, if that makes sense. So you think about all right, you have a button color test. That's a tactic. It's a thing that you've done once And you could have 20 button color tests. That's fine, but it's individual tactical things. But let's say you did run 20 button color tests. Then, well, like, what are you trying to overall achieve or aim? I don't want to say it's strategic, but it's moving up the ladder towards strategy of like color theory or like accessibility. That's potentially a theme. And you have to go like a couple themes up to reach that level of strategy that I think is kind of subjective depending on who you're talking to and what it is. But I think that would be my framework of moving from tactic to strategy.
I love that. I love this because most marketers are just doing the button testing. And we're using button testing as code.
I should have worn
my
I test button color shirt.
It can be, I change a headline. It could be added an exit pop-up, reduced a form field, whatever. But I love this because, and it's funny you said, I was looking for like a dictionary. I don't know if this is my problem with my book too. Every time I have someone interviewing me, they're like, define this. And I go on and here's an example because I only speak in examples.
Yeah.
Cannot compute. But I'll give you an example with Bitly. We've been working with Bitly for 2 years now. And the biggest question we've had was really what I was talking about before is what are the best paths to send people into the product that they will then convert into being paid customers, right? Their goal is to convert more people into paid customers. My strategy, my theme of all of our experiments are geared around understanding what are the best paths, what are the best customer journeys. I think I mentioned this on our previous episode. In over 6 or 7 experiments that we have run with Bitly for some of our ICP and our target audience, when you click on the homepage, sign up, you don't go to a sign up page, you go to the pricing page, which is against all best practices you will read about. But it is the best, most high converting customer journey that we have because we have carefully planned it and tested it. And the reason I mention this is because we also tested all sorts of things on the pricing page. We tested little banners. We tested the toggle. We tested a button. We tested pricing. We ran small tests that if you just look at them like that, they look tactical, like, oh, they changed the color of a button or they changed a banner. But there's an overarching theme and strategy behind every experiment that has led us to our results today. So we have some paths we know go this way, some paths are this way. And this is what we ran over, dozens and dozens of experiments for Bitly to figure this out. And we're still running them. So I love that definition of yours of first have this overarching theme of what are you trying to uncover? What is your big question that you're trying to answer? And then by all means, go ahead and test carousels. Sorry. But go ahead and test whatever you want.
May or may not have teased shit you need to know. This is going to be a spicy one when we get to it.
Oh.
I'd like to push you a little bit more on this because I do think I agree with you agreeing with me that the theme makes sense. However, or I guess in addition to, that theme can be linked directly to problem statements that the users have. So, I think that's where I'll go back to my problem-focused hypothesis framework, where you start with research, identify problems, hypothesize on how to solve for those problems, and then work towards solutions. If all you're doing on that tail end is a bunch of solutions testing, you're spaghetti testing, you're not doing strategic experimentation. In order to achieve strategic experimentation, it's recognizing that you take that level of solutions and you have to back it up a couple levels into that problem statement vein. Let me ask this question, which I think the answer is yes. Those problem statements are a key unlock to getting towards strategic experimentation. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and I will give an example.
Okay. Not a dictionary definition from Merriam-Webster.
Sorry. When brands come to us and they want an audit, that's like the first thing. If you talk to any CRO agency, usually they'll say, well, we need to do an audit. The go-to is review the website, review pages, review the funnel, have some ideas, whether you could be the worst CRO agency or the best CRO agency. These are kind of the themes, right? Like you go into Google Analytics, you figure out, okay, here's a leak, review the page. Whether you want to or not, you have your own biases and your own experiences and your own things. And you're like, okay, I think we should do all this stuff. And that's kind of the research. And then you come back and you're like, okay, I've audited your website. Here's what we're seeing. We're seeing all these problems. And the roadmap is we're going to test the homepage. We're going to test the pricing page. We have some ideas. Here's some ideas. Here's what we do. We actually do customer research first. So yes, we'll go into Google Analytics. We have our team look at where the drops are, where the problems are. But before reviewing any page, we actually do customer research first. So all the interviews and surveys and all that stuff in order to get as many customer insights as possible. We look for the 3 biggest pains we look that people are experiencing right now. We're looking for the biggest aha moments. We're looking for the biggest value that my client solution provides. And once we have all of that, we then audit the website. And we audit the website from our customer's prisma, saying, okay, if we look at the website, not from a best practices and not from UX, but we just look at the website and say, if I'm this customer, then I now know so much about their challenges, their pains, their hesitations, their concerns, how they feel, how they want to feel. I have all this information. Now I go to the website and now I'm looking at the copy and I'm looking at the design and I'm looking at the images and the colors. And I can say, nothing we're saying makes sense. Or, dude, we're almost there, but we're using the wrong words, or we're using the wrong terms, or we're using screenshots that make no sense. Or it's so much easier to come in with that lens and audit and know what's wrong and what makes no sense. And I give you all this example because this is the strategy, because when you do that, you can look at the website and you go, okay, we are over-explaining. We are over-complicating. We are not telling the right story. When you do that, then you can reverse engineer and say, okay, my CRO strategy is I want to tell the right story so that when people come and land on our website, they know exactly immediately that it's for them. They know what we do and they know how we solve it and they know that they can trust us. Then you can start doing the problem solving. Then you can start asking specific questions. Then you can run individual experiments. But first, you need that lens of your customers in order to even see the big problem, the overarching problem. That's how we kind of reverse engineer it.
So it makes a ton of sense. That's what we did a lot at Spiro. And I think it depends on the amount of resourcing you have to do the customer feedback, the qualitative stuff, which is all incredibly powerful. I think you should do it. If you have all that capacity to do it ASAP, do it. What we did a lot at Spiro, and I try and do a lot of this in my own personal job too, is that customer research does actually help you uncover the themes that then filters down into the solutions and the hypotheses. So that's like benefit 1. It does help you think strategically because it gets you, almost fast tracks you towards those themes. But the bonus benefit too is if you are just coming to a site and you're a person who doesn't know anything about, let's just say pickleball shoes, because that's just on my mind. I was just doing a lot of shopping for pickleball shoes. Rip, I can't play for a little bit because I just maybe tore my ACL, but I digress. If I was shopping for pickleball shoes, I have a specific mindset of who I am and my skill set and what I'm looking for and traction in the feet and comfortability and, bounciness, whatever. I have specific needs. But if you, Talia, you're looking at just the funnels and being like, oh, you're looking at that quantitative data, not the qualitative, the quantitative. And you're like, there's a drop off in the add to cart. You might actually be more inclined to follow tactics and best practice bullshit because you don't have that quantitative piece to help you link towards it. It actually makes sense. And in fact, not just makes sense, it should be the way that you start with that qualitative to put yourself in the mindset of those users and then supplement that with the quantitative data. So is that our own CRO best practice around process, not around tactics, that you have to, and you probably should start with qualitative to truly understand the mindset of the users, get their mental model, because the alternative might be you look at quantitative data and you might gravitate towards hacks that fix the leaky funnels. You know what I mean?
That is our framework. The emotional targeting framework is based on qualitative data first before anything, because people, they don't buy features and they don't buy product and they don't buy pricing or technology or AI. They buy a solution to their problem. And in order for me to actually optimize things on a strategic level in a meaningful way, I have to understand customers first. So it's not a best practice. It's an entire, I hope it isn't, because it's my whole framework and methodology for the past more than a decade, 15 years.
But I think it actually is its own best practice by the literal definition, not the bullshit green sticky CTA equals best practice. It's a literal best practice of process that does help influence. You don't always have to do it, because again, I think there is a world where perhaps you don't have access to the qualitative data immediately. And you might be able to spin up something quickly with quantitative data and get something started, but very quickly you should do your best to supplement. So it doesn't mean you should always do it if you don't have that ability. And I don't want to make it a global rule. Do the best that you can given the resources. But I'm totally aligned that that's a good, it should be the best. It seems like the best way to approach.
I would say that, as a CRO agency, it's easier, right? Because I'm coming from outside and like, here's our framework. Most people come to us because of this framework and we'll execute it for you. But if you're working internally in CRO, no problem. Like you're already doing stuff. I'm just saying you're missing the bigger picture. So right now, when you're thinking about 2025, I would say gear up for some qualitative research. Like Q1 should be dedicated for interviews, for surveys, for uncovering the real pains that are driving people to your website or the real value that your solution provides. You don't have to do it in like, obviously, CRO agency, we do it in like 4 to 6 weeks. Here's our process, blah, blah, blah. But like if you're working internally, you could take a whole quarter to do this. You can take longer, but as long as that's in your mind,
yeah, totally.
That's what matters. So you can start now and then say, hey, I'm going to take November and part of December to actually, I'm going to take the next 2 months to uncover this stuff so that in January we can kick off some strategic tests.
Yeah.
Fine. But I'm just saying, keep doing what you're doing, but start implementing those pieces in there. And we're talking quite big right now, but as I said, like it's enough to interview 10 people. It's enough to get one customer survey out there to get this started. And by the way, once you have this information and once you have this strategic data and insights, then you can leverage AI. Because AI is as good as what you feed it. And that's what you can use it for. So
I do want to table AI for a second because I think that's it's its own, I was going to say barrel of nuts, but that's not a thing. I'm trying to think of a word. It's its own thing. Beast. There we go. It's its own beast. I love that. Let's maybe start wrapping on like, what are some of the tactical things we could do today to identify if you're actually running a strategic or tactical experimentation program and assess where you are. I know there's maturity audits. Spiro has one. I'm sure you guys have one. There's a lot of maturity audits, but I don't think that audit will tell you, if you think of a spectrum, are you more on the tactical or strategic side? So if we had to ask some questions today for people to self-evaluate, are you in the more tactical or strategic? And then let's go towards how can we actually, if you've identified your tactical and you want to move towards strategic, how do we go towards that? So a couple of questions, I'll kick it off. Something that I think is important to ask is, if you look at your testing roadmap for like, let's say the past couple months or the past couple quarters, if you look at it and you're like, there is no theme, it seems like we're kind of just scrambling and putting stuff on that we could just put on, spaghetti testing. If you have conducted research, but you're not leveraging it or connecting it, or you haven't conducted research, I think those are some pretty quick signals that you're probably tactical and you're probably too solution focused and not building it up towards strategy. Would you add to that?
Yeah, I'd add one more thing. I'd say before you kicked off this year's roadmap, so you probably put together a deck or whatever, a task in Asana or something that said, what are your goals? I would challenge you to go back to that slide deck that you created to present to your team, or, that task you put in whatever PM solution you're using. And I want you to go back and ask yourself, what does it say there? What is the goal when it says there? Like, is it, we need to double our conversions? We need to get more sales? Or is there something more strategic? Like, we need to uncover this. We need to understand this. We need to help product inform the aha moment. We need to, if there's a question at the top, you're probably doing better than most. But if you go back to that planning session you had at the beginning of the year, wherever it is, even in a Google Doc, and you're like, this is all tactical. This is all numbers driven. It's all about like KPIs, OKRs. It's about how many tests you're running. It's about what tools you're using. Then you're more tactical than strategic.
So I think you're basically saying if you have a metric-based goal that's number-based versus a learning informational-based goal, I think the information-based, learning-based goal is more strategic versus generate X amount of leads or Y amount of conversions or X amount of dollars, whatever it is. Those goals are important. I think they're important to understand that's your goal. That's what you're ultimately working towards. But that's a goal. That's not a strategy. The strategy is learn more about X to generate that dollar amount. And that's actually, it's pretty full circle because that goes into the definition where, again, strategy is a plan of action or policy designed to achieve a major or overall aim. The overall aim is that goal part, but the plan of action is the strategy part, and the plan of action is in the learning.
And I would also say that the metrics or the way for you to measure.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, totally.
Okay, it's your goal should be, for example, I want to help drive more people into paid. Our goal is to understand what features we should be adding. I want to understand what are the best pops. I want to understand what our pricing should look like. You can have business goals, but the idea is you have a question. What metrics will you use to measure your success? Those are I need X amount of signups. So I need to double our conversion rate. Or we need to see more adds to carts, stuff like that. So it's the question, the strategic question that you're asking. It should be rooted in your business and your customers.
So this is an interesting point because I'm typing some notes here about strategic hypotheses. And I think there's actually a lot of overlap in the strategy of the program versus almost the strategy of the test, where what you're explaining, a lot of people are like, we will run an A/B test and it will increase conversion rate. That's their hypothesis. It's like, if we test button color, then we will get money. Like, that's their hypothesis, right? A strategic hypothesis, almost in a meta way, leveling up to a strategic experimentation program, adds that because or what we learned or the behavior associated with that, right? In order to achieve strategic experimentation, you have to run strategic experiments. And those strategic experiments are leveraged in that because of the data. Am I onto something?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's...
Hell yeah.
That's it.
Clip that, Shiva. So anything else you'd recommend for people to get more strategic? They've recognized through their audit, they're like, shit, we didn't really have a theme here. We know we need to talk more to customers. What can people do today? And what can people do in the next couple months to start progressing and moving away from tactical into strategic?
This is why CRO is so different than like PPC or SEO or any other type of marketing piece, because you really do have to understand a lot more, right? You have to understand psychology and you have to understand marketing and ads and SEO and everything. Like, there's so much to understand. But the reason I say this is because when you are thinking about you want to become more strategic, you need to step back and ask yourself, what are the unanswered questions that you have? What is the business struggling with? What is marketing struggling with? It's not, we're not getting enough signups. It's something is wrong. We have tried everything. We're pouring ads. We've ramped up content marketing. We're like A/B testing the hell out of everything and we're still not getting the result. Why is this happening? Just asking that question makes you more strategic, because you have to step back and say, it's nothing. We've tried all the tactics. Maybe it's it could be an influencer campaign, a guerrilla, whatever you try, those are tactics. I want you to step back. Just ask yourself, why aren't these things working? And then usually the answer is something in our messaging, something in how we're talking about our product, something in how we're talking to customers. There's something that isn't working. When you ask yourself that question, it's a more strategic question. It's not tactical, but it's a strategic question that makes you pause and start thinking about what's missing. And on a tactical level, I would say simply launching qualitative research can help you with that. So if you were saying something's amiss, we've tried everything, or we could try more stuff, but still something's not connecting, do some interviews. That would be number one. Like, talk to people, ask them meaningful questions about where they were, how they feel, what they're doing right now, how this tool or solution helps them. So on a strategic level, it's asking yourself what's amiss. And on a tactical level, it's going out there and doing qualitative research for the sake of qualitative insights.
Everyone tells CROs to go talk to people, but why aren't those people talking to CROs? Why is no one checking in on us, That's the worst dad joke ever. I hate it.
No one cares about it.
For anyone listening, make sure you go check in and talk to CRO and ask them how they're doing, because we're customers to our, I don't know, we matter. Anyway.
We matter to like A/B testing platforms.
Yeah. God, that's so depressing.
Sorry.
Oh, God. All right. Well, that's the best way to wrap that part of the episode. We're going to get into a spicy conversation after this. So, Talia, what is it time for?
Tell stories.
Time for shit you need to know. Is it time for that, Talia?
Okay. Time for shit
All right,
you need to know. I'm like, I don't know. Let's talk about skydiving a bit more.
So I know Talia and I have separately and privately talked about carousels, and the discourse in carousels on websites is I don't want to say mixed. I think the going rate is that mostly carousels suck and you should never do carousels ever. But and I think Talia also shares this perspective, that there's actually some cases where it might make sense. And there are some challenges and limitations that they have, but there still might be some nuance where there are appropriate use cases. One thing I did want to call out is, like, for example, LinkedIn has carousels built into their platform for posts. Microsoft, Amazon, Walmart, a bunch of major companies still do use carousels. So I think broad scale saying never do a carousel ever isn't necessarily super productive. But I think in many cases, there are a lot of limitations where people just spray and pray and use them where it's not valid. So anyway, I think that's my perspective on carousels. Do you share a similar perspective, Talia?
I guess I have two things. One is I don't like the whole like never, ever, ever do that. I mean, obviously I posted 2 weeks ago about a carousel test that we ran for our client. Did I want to run this test? No. Did I think the carousel would work? No. But there was a strategy behind it. There was a reason why we ran this test. The variation did increase conversions. I have many different hypotheses of why this worked, and obviously we're continuing to test it.
Can I ask a question on that? I think it relates a little bit to the past part of the episode. What was the strategy involved? Like, what was the research or data that informed on perhaps this carousel being positive or working?
I can't speak to it too much, unfortunately.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, there's a lot of politics involved and NDAs and stuff. I will say that there were a lot of people involved. There's a lot of questions going on about appearances, visuals, visual communication, fonts, colors, images that we're using. And this was one way that the design team wanted to test this. It was interesting. But the reason I say this is I also wanted to call out what you said, which is, LinkedIn and Amazon. I also take kind of like beef with that kind of statement, not against you, but like the big brands can do whatever the fuck they want.
That's true.
Amazon tests the shade of orange. That's not going to help anyone in any strategy, right? So a lot of times, even when I talk about emotion in B2B, everyone says to me, but HubSpot, but all these big companies, they shout out the biggest B2B brands. Like, they don't need to use emotion.
Yeah.
They've got us already. So
I want to flesh that out. I think I misspoke. I'm aligned with you. I think where I mean with that is, if we say remove carousels everywhere, there's an assumption here that perhaps Amazon, Walmart, I forget the companies I listed, Booking, like these big companies who generally test everything and validate everything through means, you as an outside person telling them they're doing something wrong without any available data to let
Agreed.
them know that they're doing it wrong. So I'm like, is it possible that there's a better implementation? Absolutely. Is it possible that they tested into it and it worked for them? Absolutely. And is it possible for them to remove it and it'll work? Like, there's so many nuances. The fact that these big companies who generally operate from a method or form of data driven, when we say like copy competitors, right? That's where like it creates a mismatch of, people saying copy competitors. These are best practices. These big companies have tested it. There are also other people who are like, copy the big people because they validated it. Also, don't do carousels. And it's like, you can't have both of those statements at the same time.
But that's the thing, right? Like, you can't just have absolute truths and everything.
Yes, 100%.
Like, I posted that post about carousels, and the amount of comments that I got from people that never comment on my stuff. They're like, no, this is not real, or tell us the truth, or this is fake news. Like, people took it hard because carousels usually don't work. Okay. But this usually doesn't work. It's like, that's a blanket statement about anything. And you can say that about a lot of things. But I will say, when we think about carousels, we're thinking about these like, auto changing things that you can't really control, and they're in the header and they're moving and stuff. But I just want to say, over the past maybe 2.5, 3 years, there's this new design direction that I've seen that's very, very strong in B2B, which is like tabs, right? So forget the hero section. You scroll down, you see a lot of tabs. In the past, what companies did is they'd have a long, long page and you'd have featured content. Now, what designers have trained B2B purchasers to do is to flip it, is to play with tabs. Now, 2.5 years ago, that did not work. People they were just missing information. And you could clearly see with heat maps that people were just not clicking. Now, when you look at tabs, everyone's clicking, everyone's playing around with stuff. So you can use design to inform and actually educate people to use things differently. And I think that carousel is another like blanket statement, which is why I don't agree with that. Because if people just stopped with tabs, then, people wouldn't be using them today. There's much better ways to design them because most of them suck, but you can make good use of tabs in your content on any page. I'm not a big fan of blanket statements. I don't think you should just say like, hey, carousels don't work. I'm talking about a lot of people that I know that are like, never test carousels, never test this. Like,
you should just remove it tomorrow. And I'm like, but I tested into it and it worked. And they're like, nope, fuck you. Your results are wrong. Remove it. And I'm like, all right, well, that's anti-experimentation if the results have shown that a carousel is better than not. And it's funny, the tab conversation, tabs is just a carousel in like green, a different coat of paint.
Exactly.
Without a timer, I guess, which is almost, okay.
I ranted about this on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, like all the mistakes that people are making with tabs. By the way, the auto changing of tabs, the timers, the stuff. There are good ways to create tabs that you can use them to convert people and provide information that people care about and want to read when and how they want to read it. But yes, it's a different form as a carousel. So this is why I don't like these blanket statements in general.
Well, and that's like anti-experimentation is if we create these rules or even anti-rules, it is anti-experimentation to just create these generic rules of don't do something. That's just a best practice or an anti-best practice, which is anti-experimentation. Anyway, there are carousels that people get interaction with. We have a carousel on a couple of our sites. We have a carousel and we have tabs, and both of which, when we look at the actual quantitative data, we see the data. People do engage. So I know you're the same thing. Let's not create rules here. I think if you have a carousel and no one's clicking on it, then that's a great case. But there are some carousels that people do interact with.
I mean, it definitely depends on the website. And I also think it depends on the content, on who your ICP is.
Totally.
It depends on what the goals are. And I also think it really, really depends on where this carousel is. I think the go-to when people think about carousels is homepage hero.
Yes.
But let me just throw this out. Carousels and testimonials, I don't like them, but almost every website uses them and people do engage with them. They move them, they read them. That's a carousel.
100%. The statement here is if you have a carousel, just look at the click engagement. And if you get not good click engagement, then maybe that's an opportunity to test away from it. Consequently, if you have a carousel and you get really good click engagement, then maybe that's an opportunity to invest more or figure out a potential different solution. Again, not saying they do or don't work, just use the data to help guide on that. Anyway, Talia, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. We really appreciate you taking the time out of this. And I know that you have a book writing in progress.
Yes.
So we have something to look forward to in the next, week? 2 weeks or so?
Yeah, sure. No, it's coming out next year. Oh my gosh. I'm so it's actually turning into a book. I can't even believe we have 5 out of 8 chapters now.
Oh, so. I love it. Can you tease a little bit about the book? What it's going to be about?
It's about using emotional targeting and emotional resonance in general, but also, specifically in B2B. So it really is just about our framework, just about how we do strategic CRO.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Anything else you want to plug, Talia?
No.
Okay.
Good.
Awesome.
No.
All right. Well, Talia the Wolf, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.